You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. For more great shows like the one you're about to enjoy, visit electronicmediacollective.com. And now, our feature presentation.
Welcome to the exciting world of the movies.
Hello, retro movie lovers, and welcome back to the Movie Graveyard. We have got a real slam-bam musical treat for you tonight, don't we, Trev?
We do indeed. I don't want to speak out of turn here, Goat. I know this is your show, and I'm just a humble guest, but I really do feel like this is the kind of movie that the Movie Graveyard was created for.
Yeah. It's
feels like, this is like a cult hit. It's one of those cult hits that it's a cult hit because when you meet people who know this movie, they love it, right? Everyone who is into this movie is really into it, but you never feel like you know enough people that know this movie.
Yeah, exactly. This is came out in the 80s. It had roughly a week and a half theatrical release, but people remember it and love it forever. So that is the perfect Movie Graveyard movie. I will agree with that. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling. We are rolling off all kinds of Blu-rays. We got American Blu-rays.
Oh, should we say what the movie is? I guess we do.
Well, I'm sure people read the title. We're talking about the Slam Bam Walter Hill Thank You Ma'am title, Streets of Fire.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got it paused on the black screen right before the Universal logo comes up. So once you hit play, you'll see the great Universal logo that I grew up with, Trev, and I'm sure you too.
Yeah.
Before that early '90s CGI animated bullshit came out. But this is back when Universal was an MCA company. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. And when I hit go, please hit play on your streaming remotes, on your DVD/Blu-ray player remotes, and your PS3, PS4, and possibly, if you're one of the lucky few to win the lottery, PS5 remotes. All right, everybody, let's get ready. 1, 2, 3, go. Look at that beautiful, which by the way, I actually was watching something else recently, Trev, and I saw this Universal logo. It never really dawned on me. When you actually watch it, especially if you watch it in high definition like a Blu-ray, that's actually a very good special effect, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it looks great. I mean, it looks like the beginning of a sci-fi show or something,
Yeah.
And maybe because certain movies do it, I'm always waiting for it to just zoom into the Earth there. But here we go, Streets of Fire. I love this, not just the title, but then we get this a rock and roll fable.
Yeah.
And then we get the next card here.
Another time. Another
place. Yeah. So cool. Right off the bat, just already in love.
Well, the opening shot of this is really famous with the wet street and the neon lights reflecting, and Walter Hill kind of plays it off that was almost kind of like a happy accident. He just kind of noticed it on the day, but I find that hard to believe. That seems so, planned from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, it just that opening shot instantly sets the entire aesthetic of the film, and then these super fast cuts. I mean, this is just this actually reminds me a lot of the beginning of The Warriors.
Yeah.
Another Walter Hill movie we've talked about, which is kind of setting the tone very quickly with a lot of quick editing. That of course was playing with time a little bit more, but here it's just kind of setting up the world through these quick edits.
Well, it's kind of funny too, and probably part of the confusion around this movie when it came out is pretty much this is like you said, a rock and roll fable, and Walter Hill really wanted to kind of mix together all the stuff he loved as a young guy. He was pretty much if I would have made a movie at 15, I would have put all the cool stuff in the world that I love into it. And that was his approach with this film. So you kind of get this hybrid reality fantasy approach where it's the aesthetics a lot of the 1950s and even earlier decades, with clothing and cars and locations, kind of mixed with a lot of musical choices of the early 80s, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, it is a confusing movie, but that's what's cool about it. I mean, we're probably going to say this a bunch of times while watching this, but this is just the kind of studio film you do not see today. And I mean, and obviously it wasn't a hit at the time either. This was a big risk kind of movie. It didn't necessarily pay off, financially. But it is interesting, and I love movies like this. There's other films that we could talk about that do this kind of thing, where it is in its own. It makes sense to say another time, another place, because it is in its own universe. You can't really place where this is in time. You can't place exactly where it is geographically. It is a fantasy. And to what you were saying about what Hill putting in all of his stuff, he has a quote where he says, he wanted everything he thought was perfect when he was a teenager. So that included custom cars, kissing in the rain, neon, trains in the night, high-speed pursuit, rumbles, rock stars, motorcycles, jokes in tough situations, leather jackets, and questions of honor. And that's what this film is. It's all of that just mixed together into this puree, not puree. We'll get to that.
the purity of the puree. So yeah, so it's like to me, I really, especially, kind of revisiting this here in the last week. I just think the ingredients are so perfect, from the visuals to the music to the kind of like the three leads you have in this film. But like this was always kind of like a mythical movie to me, Trev. Like I remember seeing it. I'm pretty sure we rented it after the fact when it hit home video. But I remember watching this, and like in my memory of seeing it as a kid, I always remembered it as stylized as this movie is, and it almost gets criticized for being too stylized by people who don't like it. But like, I always remember this almost being like on par with Blade Runner. And then like when I kind of like rewatched it, I was kind of like surprised by how all practical and realistic it actually really is. You know what I mean?
It's funny because my memory too is I don't think I ever rented it, but I definitely only encountered this movie on cable growing up.
Yeah. And
my memory of it as a kid is just what I said, right? When I would see this very young, I didn't know when it was supposed to be taking place, because I don't think until the other night when I sat down to watch it on Netflix and actually got the idea and messaged you about doing this, I don't know that I'd ever seen it from beginning to end. And my memory is as a kid always coming in like halfway through or something, never quite knowing, when is this supposed to be taking place? So I must have missed something at the beginning, and always being kind of thrown off by it.
Yeah, like I clearly remember like watching it at home, either via videotape or HBO or something like that. And then like I just out of like curiosity, because it was weird, and like I don't know if like you kind of like noticed this too, Trev, but like movies back then, marketing has changed a lot, but movies back then had like an identity. Like you had the soundtrack, you had the movie itself, but like the way it was marketed, the trailer, and then like the poster, like every movie had its own font, its own logo, and like the poster for this movie is so burned into my brain, and seeing it on video store shelves over the years and all that kind of thing. So like this movie was kind of like always in the back of my mind, even though like I went like, probably 20 years without seeing it. I remember when I first got, OG Netflix, where they send you a DVD in the mail, I remember I visited then in like around 04, 05, maybe 06 at the latest. And then I hadn't seen it again until it hit Blu-ray a couple years ago. And it just like, I don't know, it's hard to explain for me, looking back through nostalgic lens, but it's like, it's kind of like different than I remember it, but at the same time, like it's exactly what I remember. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to explain.
Yeah, the thing about the poster being burned in your head that I think is funny is I always remember the video box cover and the poster having that tagline on it: "Tonight is what it means to be young," which of course is one of the songs. And just like now watching it, I'm older than everyone in this movie now, but maybe it's just because Dafoe and Pere don't look very young. It doesn't really seem like this is a movie of youth as much as like I know it's meant to be, right? Obviously Diane Lane, very young here. She was only 18 when they made this.
She was just graduating high school. Yeah.
We didn't even talk about her first big musical number there. Now, of course, she's not singing, but she does a killer job lip syncing in here, and really does sell like the rock and roll aesthetic, which I know. I read about how when she auditioned, they were a little nervous about that, but she really instantly impressed Walter Hill with how much she just kind of really like put herself forward as like a rock queen,
Yeah.
Oh, I love the punch sound effects here too. How they put that really big like bass rumble on Lee Ving punching everybody, punching Bill Paxton. It's just it's great.
And yeah, the casting is very, very risky at the time, because it's like the script, the Eileen character Diane Lane plays, originally on the original version of the script, it was supposed to be a 28-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And then she kind of just came in and blew them away in the audition. And like, it's another movie. I don't know if you've seen it, Trev, but the movie she did like maybe 2 years before this, called Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains, which is like a really cool it's basically a girl power movie, but it's about this female punk band trio that kind of like, like literally just a punk trio, just they barely start playing, and like a promoter kind of puts them on a bill with some other punk bands. Ray Winstone plays a British punker. It's a great early role from him. And they kind of just take off as a novelty act because, they're three female, like really young, like 15, 16-year-old girls. Like almost like you can tell in a way it's almost kind of based on the Runaways, you know what I mean? And it's just this movie where Diane Lane is the front woman there. It's really a coming of age movie, and by the end, like they take off and they leave the bands that they started out with in the dust, and she's totally just kind of in control, and it's just a great movie about her going from being this young skittish girl who like could barely get the courage to go up and sing a song to becoming like this star, and she's like even to the point where like the other people in her band don't like her anymore because she's kind of taken center stage. And I just thought it's so amazing, like the most awesome probably double feature in the world you could probably imagine would probably be watching that movie and then watching this, because you could almost take it as like kind of like the backstory for her character in this. But so I think doing that movie gave her like what she needed to be able to walk into the audition and kind of wow Walter Hill,
Yeah, I have a different double feature in mind. I've told you this already, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later. But I have a thesis about how I think this movie is a perfect double bill with Mad Max Fury Road. So, I'll dive into that a little later. But here we finally get our credits. And before we start diving into these actors, I also just want to talk about too, like the Walter Hill aspect of it. So we've talked about the Warriors before, not in a commentary episode, but in our Warriors versus Wanderers episode.
Yeah.
And to me, this really does, like, this would also actually, I know this would make a great double feature with the Warriors because I literally just did that with a friend. I showed a friend Streets of Fire, and it was the first time watch for her, and she loved it so much that she kind of instantly wanted to see, like, another Walter Hill movie. And so we watched The Warriors, which she also had never seen and loved them. So I know I can say that those are a great double feature as well. But stylistically, this really feels like, I mean, also, I guess all Walter Hill films do have a feel to them, but this really does feel like the spiritual sequel to The Warriors. It's interesting that this is actually the follow-up to 48 Hours, because I don't think this feels super similar to that. I know 48 Hours is basically the reason this movie exists. He had a lot of clout coming off the success of that. And I think it's very cool when someone uses the clout of a big mainstream hit like that to make a film like this. And that's another reason I love Walter Hill.
Which, by the way, Trev, like I was hearing him relate that kind of how the genesis of this film came about, him parlaying his 48 hour success and him pretty much giving a blank check at that point to go make a movie. And it's like, don't you think don't you got to respect that when somebody's like okay, like they knew they were, recognizing what the situation was, and like they knew that this was a movie they probably could never ever get made at any other time, and they just went for it. And he wasn't worried about like how a lot of people are like, oh, I have a hit, now I got to go have a bigger hit, you know what I mean? It was just like, what do you want to do artistically?
It's kind of like two-sided for me, because like I respect it in that aspect, but I also like respect it in a way that I legit think that him and the producers like Joel Silver, I think they actually thought this was going to be a big hit, which is even more kind of like amazing to me, that they thought everyone would be on their wavelength with this very, very strange film. And it's just another case where I think they were a little bit ahead of their time in terms of what this movie is. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think of these? I want to ask during this sequence, what do you think of these bizarre like wipes that he's using for some of the transitions here, where it's not quite a star wipe, but it's this strange like scratched wipe that comes across the screen?
Yeah, I think it was really like, I love it. I think it was really, and there's a couple other kind of interesting editing choices there throughout the film, but I love it because I think he was really trying to go for without directly calling back comic books. I think he was going for that comic book type feel, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we since know that, like, so I know he talked about how he'd always wanted to make a comic book film, but he was not enamored with any of the existing comic books. And Tom Cody, the main character here, really was his attempt to create a comic book hero of his own. But also we now know that his initial conception of the Warriors was to have it be very comic booky. And of course he went on to do the director's cut, which I hate. but yeah,
he does the narration.
Yeah. But yeah, he was definitely always aiming for that.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too, though. I kind of recognize it off the bat, but the guy who plays this little, leader of this gang who comes in and starts harassing Tom Cody's sister and everybody in this coffee shop is actually the guy who ended up playing the gang leader in the great James Spader film Tough Turf a little bit later.
Oh.
Yeah, I want to say his name is Paul Moniz, but I could be wrong.
My first observation about Tom Cody, no matter whatever else you say about him throughout this film, I want to point out what a great brother he is, because the telegram we saw her write to him earlier, it just said, "Tom, come home, I need you." No further explanation or anything, and he rushed right home just because his sister sent a 2-sentence telegram. He's a good brother.
And of course, his sister, who I think is kind of an unconventional choice to play Michael Pyre's sister, but I like her a lot, is Deborah, was it Van Valkenburg? And of course, we know her from the Warriors. So
the Warriors, yeah.
It's kind of funny though, because you remember how when we did that Warriors versus Wanderers episode, like we talked a lot about how the films are kind of intertwined and like the production history and release almost at the same time and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of interesting that like Walter Hill kind of, for kind of like his, spiritual follow up to Warriors, he kind of went back to a 1950s aesthetic the way the Wanderers had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Walter Hill just strikes me as that kind of guy. Obviously, that's the time he grew up, but you can see why that 50s aesthetic of those gangs and that culture would just speak to him. I don't know. We're gonna say a lot about Michael Pare throughout this commentary, I'm sure, but let me just get this out of the way so I don't forget. Am I crazy in that, especially in this like young Michael Pare, does he look a lot like Costas Mandylor, or is that just me? Like, I feel like they are so similar looking.
I see that perfectly. You know who I was going to say is reminds me of in some shots is Josh Peck, when Josh Peck got older and buff and hunky.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so like Michael Pare, 2 years before he was headlining this movie, he was a chef in a restaurant. So it's pretty amazing. He had done Eddie and the Cruisers before this, and Walter Hill had seen that. So that's kind of like what, got his foot in the door. But pretty much from what Walter Hill was saying was like he just wanted like basically a certain kind of coolness and physicality to the role of Tom Cody.
And he is perfect for that. I mean, in the review I just wrote of this on Letterboxd, I said that. So I'll preface this by I'll speak more to this, but my one quote I put was, if actors were never required to say lines, Michael Pare would have been one of the biggest stars in the world. Because I just think, and we'll talk about his acting, I'm sure, but I do just think he does look so badass this movie. Like he just films so well. He's so handsome. The camera loves him. He smolders really well. If you're just going for a pure visual aesthetic, you really can't beat him here.
Well, I have to say, really, too, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but I almost think if Michael Pare was like a 23-year-old actor now, he would almost be more suited to these times than then. Because, like, back then, with the very few exceptions of somebody like a Walter Hill or something, most directors didn't want this type of guy as, like, the lead back then. Like, if you look back, look how quirky leading men could be in the 80s, Trev. I mean, you just literally had everybody from, like, headlining big films back then, from Richard Dreyfuss to Michael J. Fox to Ralph Macchio. Like, there really wasn't, like, that archetype. And then, like, in recent years, let's say, like, the last 12, 15 years, they've been importing all these British and Australian actors, like, like Chris Hemsworth and so forth, because they have that physicality that a lot of American actors don't have. And it's like, in a weird way, I could almost see Michael Pare having a bigger career now than he did even then.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about it because we're not into the action yet. But I know, like, so, in retrospect, this movie didn't perform. Especially the co-writer Larry Gross, he's really blamed the failure of the movie on Michael Pare, and it's kind of known that Pare and Walter Hill didn't necessarily get along, and they were kind of very vocal where they say that they felt like they picked the wrong leading man. And I know that they're for a hot second, I think they had Eric Roberts cast in the part, and he dropped out. And then they were also talking to Tom Cruise. And I don't know, like watching it now, I'm gonna guess you're gonna agree, Goat. Michael Pare does give a very stiff wooden performance in this, but it ultimately so works for the tone of the film. Yeah. And I just think, like, I love Tom Cruise, but I was kind of thinking like he definitely wouldn't been totally wrong for this. I think he'd be too charismatic. I don't think this is. I just think there's something about how kind of, and I mean this in a good way, how wooden and how kind of dead-eyed Tom Cody is. It totally works in this world.
Well, I mean, nothing about our boy Tom, because we know at the ripe old age of 53, he's jumping across buildings and shattering ankles. But, like, Tom Cruise did not have the physicality at this point in time, I don't believe. You know what I mean? Like, I would think you would even argue, I mean, it doesn't really matter with Top Gun, because it's, you know, he's flying a plane. But, I mean, like, Tom Cruise, you know, until the kind of the rules of cinema were rewritten a little bit in the early 90s, where they started making like leading action men a little more human. Like, I just don't think Tom would have played this at all. I mean, he would be probably about the same height as Amy Madigan here, and it just the contrast between Tom and the other characters, I don't think would have worked. You know, like that. Oh, the acting talent, yeah, Tom would have tore up the role and had charisma out the ass, but the physicality, which is like, you know, like I always seen Michael Paré as like being perfect in this movie, because I didn't look at it so much like, oh, he's doing a shitty leading man job. I looked at it more as like he's acting the way he's being directed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's such a wide range of performances here. So I would say, like, in my mind, I feel like Michael Paré and Rick Moranis are both giving performances that would maybe typically generally be considered bad, right? Not great performances. Yeah. Then I think Amy Madigan's giving a legit, really good performance. And I think so is Diane Lane. Then you have Willem Dafoe, who's doing this, like, over-the-top thing, right? So it's all across the board, and every one of them works, and it all works together. And that's a testament to what Walter Hill's doing. It's a testament to just how bizarre the tone of the film is. So it can work with all these different kinds of performances, and it's what makes it ultimately more interesting. Because if everybody was just doing the same thing, the movie would be a little flat. It wouldn't be as compelling.
Well, like, for people not following along on the DVD or whatever, you know, for anybody to say Michael Paré is kind of like, oh, he's kind of flat, he's kind of wooden. Literally, the plot of this movie is Diane Lane is a singer. She gets kidnapped by a motorcycle gang, run by Willem Dafoe. And as far as I know, Trev, like, pretty much his only motivation for kidnapping this famous singer was pretty much just to tie her up and rape her as much as he wanted to. I mean, am I? Yeah. You know, that's the depth of the plot, right? Mm-hmm. So I like. With that kind of, because even when I was watching it the other night, Trev, you know, this is the first time I sat down and from beginning to end, you know, because even when I picked up this Blu-ray a couple years ago, I think I kind of skimmed it and watched some scenes, and I watched the documentary, I know, but I don't think I really had sat down and watched this movie beginning to end in about 15 years, and then, like, yeah, I was like, oh, this movie's kind of like empty, but it's empty on purpose, because it's intentionally style over substance, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. One of the ways it's like Mad Max Fury Road.
Exactly.
A very simplistic chase narrative, heavy on style.
Yeah. Like, I think he would...
stoic, a leading man of few words. I actually think Tom Cody might even work more as a character if he had less dialogue. Mm-hmm. Right? I think you could like even rewrite the script a little bit to have him be more like Mad Max and say even less.
Here's another great stylistic choice when he's looking at the photograph.
You know, the photo looks like it's like from the 20s.
Yeah, but and then it kind of dissolves into this black and white performance of her singing. Mm-hmm. Which, like, when you're talking about, like, you know, like you know, we're older than like everybody, because you know, like most you know, whatever men, like I like, you know, and being a bit younger than Diane Lane, like I first noticed her in the Judge Dredd movie, and I thought she was like, wow, like, who is she? She's this amazing movie star, like, perfect woman. And it's like, it's so weird, like when you go back and you watch some of her early stuff like this, and like you in like definitely her role in The Outsiders, like she was always portrayed as like the super like beautiful girl, but it's like now when you look at like 18-year-old Diane Lane, you're like, shit, I'm not old enough to be her father. Yeah. And so like yeah, when I watch her in this, like, aside from the parts where she's on stage and she's really commanding authority and very womanly, like the rest of the time I'm just like, oh, she's like, her character, she's just like a little girl, you know what I mean?
Well, the reason I know I'm older than everyone in this film is because Walter Hill had kind of a rule about this film where he decided that there will be no one in this town who's no one who's over 30. Like everybody in this movie and everyone exists in this world is under 30, to kind of give it this, like, again, this youth-based, you know, vibe, and it works because it's the strange feeling of where are the older authority figures, right? Where's the mayor of this town or something? Or where's the police chief? Everyone's young. But Diane Lane, of course, is the youngest. I'm very struck in this film by, I feel like young Diane Lane. I never realized it because I wasn't used to seeing her this young. I feel like young Diane Lane looks like an Conan O'Brien if they made it of Liv Tyler and Mila Jovovich.
I could see that. And another thing too is like that little scar she has on her cheek. You notice it in the movies where she's young, but I don't think I quite noticed that in like her more recent stuff. But yeah. It's just I don't know. I still, even to this day, I still think she's underrated. I mean, she's had a really big career, but it's like whenever I watch the DCU and I see her with a terrible wig on, supposed to be Ma Kent, I gotta roll my eyes, because I feel like even though she's great in the role and everything, because she's a great actress, like I just feel like I kind of feel like she should, even at this time, I think she's in her late 50s. I think she still has what it takes to command a lead in a film.
Mm-hmm. A lot of our main cast is together in this scene. So my friend who I showed this to the other night, she asked a great question, Goat, that I'm going to pose to you. She asked, and it's a two-part question. She asked, who was the most famous person in this cast when the movie was made? And who would you say is the most famous now? And my answer for both was Rick Moranis. I said I would think Rick Moranis was the most famous at the time, and I would say he still is. No, Willem Dafoe is now, I guess, but
at the time, I think you're right, because I think he had already made Strange Brew, right?
Yeah, and SCTV, right? So
yeah.
I think he would be the one who was known. So, but now, would you say it's him or Willem Dafoe? Who's like more famous?
Oh, today it's got to be Willem Dafoe. The guy's done like over 200 roles. But like, what? I'm young enough to remember though, and I guess it was more of the music than even the movie itself. But Eddie and the Cruisers was white hot. And that's another reason why I kind of can't believe this movie didn't do better than it did. But one thing I think we should mention, since we're going to sit here and talk about how this movie wasn't a success because it was supposed to have sequels and all that, and it didn't, is this was kind of, as it always happens, and we've talked about in the past, Trev, this movie was kind of, it's kind of an unusual film, probably going to be hard to sell, so you need the studio to be 100% behind it, and it was the victim of, in between the time they made it and when it was released, roughly about a year after that, there was a studio changeover, so
yep,
there's been a lot of comments that it didn't really get the marketing support, and there's also some comments that it was starting to do well, but it just, was kind of just yanked out of theaters, which I know the movie business has changed quite a bit, but like, I'm always kind of, I take those claims dubiously, Trev, when people claim a movie was making so much money and it was pulled out of theaters. Like, I almost feel like back then theater owners would not allow that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it didn't completely, it wasn't like the biggest complete disaster. It was just one of those movies that it finally broke even on video type things. Like, it wasn't,
Yeah, you always had the nice relief of video back then.
Yeah.
And this, of course, feels like something that probably did get rented a lot. But I get their logic of thinking this movie was going to be huge. In '84, this is the era of MTV, and to get this very young, attractive cast and sell a film as a rock and roll fable, and that neon look, and like you said, coming off of Blade Runner, this movie does have a very Blade Runner-ish look to it, in terms of visuals, and then just the hubris of coming off of 48 Hours and people liking the Warriors. I would have put money into this. I would have thought it was a fairly safe bet.
And Walter Hill is even quick to point out, it's like, it was a $15 million film, which was a good size, but that wasn't even considered a huge movie back then. I think there were some movies that were up into $30 and $40 million of budget back then.
And this was a time where, a movie like this, a movie this strange, could be made by studio and be a hit. And I don't know, that's not necessarily true today, because this doesn't tick all the boxes of just generic franchise film number one, even though this was meant to kick off a trilogy, which I guess we can talk about a little later. But
what's funny though, Trevor, is like, because I kind of felt the same way too when I watched this the other night, when I said like it was exactly the movie I remember, but also it was different. And I don't want to scare people who maybe ever listen to this and for some reason haven't seen the movie yet. I don't want to scare them off of saying this is too weird of a movie, because it's really not.
Oh, no.
Because it's so basic of kind of like an action thing. The only thing that you really have that's different compared to a more like exploitational action picture of the time is it's really just the production design and a musical number at the begin and ending. And when I say musical number, I mean Diane Lane and her band performing on stage. Other than those elements, like if they just would have, for whatever reason decided like they only had the budget to set this in modern day 1980s Los Angeles or New York, they probably could have made this movie for a third of the budget, and with the elements and action and whatever, it probably would have turned a way better profit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Walter Hill has said like every movie he's made is a Western at its core, right? And that's definitely true of this. Like you said, and this again, to go back to my Mad Max analogy, it's a very simplistic action movie narrative. And like you said, it's just what makes it interesting is the style of it, the visuals. And this is going to sound like a very pretentious thing to say, but going back to you not wanting to scare people off, this is the kind of movie that I would point anyone who just loves cinema to and say, if you like cinema, then everything Walter Hill is doing here in terms of this bizarre fantasy world and setting this really kind of simplistic stock story in it, you're going to love it. Like, I think that's what makes it compelling and interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot that's been made of like visually movies that this inspired, and I kind of would agree with it a little bit. But one of the movies that I've seen it supposedly inspire visually, at least, was RoboCop. I can see that with the degrading inner city and all that.
Yeah, and even just and then like some of that the looks of the factories, and even some of like the neon lighting and stuff like that. By the way, this club looks pretty cool. I would hang out at this club.
But yeah, like we got to talk about this dancing girl, right, on the bar. Like she commands like so much performance and authority here.
I looked her up. I think she was like some like kind of well-known Russian dancer.
Yeah, she's really good, and I mean. Her the way she moves and her body type, like I figured she was a professional dancer. So no, okay, like I think this is the scene where we first kind of realize there's something a little bit off about Willem Dafoe based on his wardrobe choice here.
You don't think he's just going like fishing later?
Yeah, so he's basically wearing a pleather like pair of, what do you call those, wading pants, suspenders. Yeah. But yeah, like. And I gotta say, I kind of made a boo-boo recently, Trev, is I had the chance to watch the movie The Loveless with Willem Dafoe, and it was like, I passed it up. I think it went off streaming. I had like a week to watch it, and I missed it, and I feel bad about that, because I feel like, I've been wanting to see that movie forever, because I always like kind of heard it kind of tied into, he was playing a similar biker character.
Yeah, and that's basically the film that got him this, right? Catherine Bigelow was somehow connected to someone on this movie, and he was recommended off of that.
Yeah. But, and like, I want to say maybe the previous year, if I'm remembering the release years correctly, or somewhere around this time, really close to this time, he had also played the villain in To Live and Die in L.A., which is actually my favorite Dafoe character of all time. Like, I think he took the quirky villain to a really good extreme in that film. So Trev, another thing, this movie supposedly budget $14.5 million, made a little over $8 million at the box office. So, not what they're expecting, but it had stiff competition though. Like, again, because the studio changeover, not much promotion supposedly. They kind of, don't you feel like this was kind of a dumb idea that they opened this movie the same weekend as Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock?
That's not the smartest move, that's for sure. Especially coming off of how hot Star Trek 2 was,
Right.
And that being like the direct sequel at the return of this beloved character, yeah. Yeah.
It just, especially if you're going for like, and obviously Star Trek is very multi-generational, but at that time, in what was it, probably the previous 5 years they had released, this was the third Star Trek movie coming out, so it had called quite a bit of a young audience as well. They kind of, they scooped up the older fans that remember the 60s show, and then they, so like, yeah, I feel like if you're going for the youth market, don't bring it out against anything that also competes for younger people's attention.
Well, that's important to point out, too, when you say going for the youth market, because, Ed Begley Jr., we should probably talk about that. But really quickly, it's like one of the things that also this film is known for is Walter Hill made this decision for it to not be very violent, right? To have no blood, to have nobody actually be murdered on screen, and aim for a PG, which is quite the difference from 48 Hours. or the Warriors. And so he was kind of making a concerted effort to aim for like a younger audience, which is also then again you're kind of cannibalizing the Star Trek audience. You know, you're not counter programming Star Trek anymore. You're aiming for the family, just like that one is.
Exactly. And it's like, because the script originally way more violent, and like one of the changes was originally, you know, how Tom Cody shows up to town with his bag of suitcase and his big bag. Originally, he was supposed to show up with all these guns, like he was already a badass guy, but they were like, no, that would paint him as too violent, so that's why they had that scene where he goes to the mechanic and he buys the weapons. Yeah, it vaguely surprised me when he popped out of the shadows there as a completely, almost like a suit-faced, dude, like almost unrecognizable bum.
So I was trying to place that, like, was he, like, known enough at this time to be, like, a cool cameo, or was that just, like, he was a working actor and he was a fun guy to have in that role?
I couldn't figure that either, because I would have thought he would have, and I could be wrong, he might have come out either later this year or the next year, but I would have thought he would already been, like, working and busy with, wasn't he on St. Elsewhere around this time?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the, I mean, I'm trying to that timeline.
I mean, he definitely hadn't made the best horror movie yet, but like later as he would with Transylvania 65000.
65000, yeah. Another film we should do someday.
Yeah, I got a copy of it. I'm down.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Bakester. We should take this second too, because we kind of completely blew over it. But when Amy Madigan showed up, and we didn't even talk about our boy Bill Paxton with the best pompadour of all time playing the bartender. But yeah, like, so anyway, Tom Cody has this sidekick who
boy.
Yeah, so Tom Cody originally was supposed to be, you know, kind of how he really is in the movie. You know, a guy in his late 20s, where the you know, here it's younger because Michael Paré was only 23 when they made the film. And but the original concept for his sidekick, I want to say, what was the guy's name? Camacho, something like that. Yeah, and it was supposed to be an older, I want to say, like maybe even in his 40s, overweight. Well, it was written to be an overweight Latino man. They were in negotiations though with Edward James Olmos when Amy Madigan came in, and she was basically coming in to read for the part of Tom Cody's sister. But her kind of having the moxie that she did, she's like, I don't want to do that. Like, this is such a cool movie. Like, let me play Camacho, you know? And she came in and kind of, like, you know, did this swagger and whatever. And, like, to his credit, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of surprised me that this is the way it happened. Just, like, on the spot, she won Walter Hill over, and they kind of had to break off negotiations or talks with Edward James Olmos, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, I think it was Larry Gross who made a great point on the documentary I watched about the film, where he was talking about that, about how, you know, obviously Walter Hill does deserve a lot of credit for just rolling with that and seeing the potential once she raised that point in the audition. But they did point out that Walter Hill already had experience with that, knowing that can work in terms of the Ripley casting, you know, of Ripley being written as a man in the script and casting Sigourney Weaver. So he knew that kind of change could be beneficial with the right performer.
Yeah, and I mean, she definitely brought it, but I gotta say, like, I think her being in the role compared to another man, kind of, I think that brought out the contrast between her and Tom Cody. Whereas I think if you would have had somebody like a Olmos in there almost would have been the same kind of physicality and, like, you know, whereas, like, what I love the scenes with her, with Amy Madigan and Michael Paré, because it's very clear who's Batman and who's Robin, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, as my friend pointed out, there's a scene later with Tom Cody knocking Diane Lane out. And McCoy is there, and my friend is like, if this was two men in this scene, this would have a completely different vibe, you know?
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, but I think Amy Madigan is, like, definitely maybe, like, yeah, she's one of the stronger performances in this for sure, and I love her in this.
And it's kind of funny too, because it's not only is she one of the best ones, but it kind of almost like you almost couldn't imagine the movie without her in it, because I feel like she is the one, out of all the performance, she is the one that almost sells, like, her kind of, like, you know, whereas, like, what I love the scenes with her, with Amy Madigan and Michael Paré, because it's very clear who's Batman and who's Robin, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I her constant kind of, chain smoking, those weird little cigars, cigarillos or whatever it is she smokes, and her hat and the way she talks. Like, I feel like her kind of like tough Chicago type character is kind of what almost sells this more as like an old timey noir than anything else. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And she also, like, her existence where she says, I'm just out of the Army, and she talks about how she was like in the auto pool and she's got still the mechanic outfit on. It's another thing that kind of sets the film in a strange time where you're just like, wait, when is this coming out of, like, is this coming out of like a world war? Like, what's going on here? The fact that she's dressed like that. And Tom Cody says he's an ex-soldier too. And we see him undressed. He's dressed like the old 40s gangster with the suspenders. But so I mentioned earlier that, like, none of the main characters in this are over 30. The one who, like, kind of boggles my mind on that is, I guess, like, Lee Ving is just one of those guys who was probably born looking old, huh?
Oh yeah, Lee Ving. So we got to talk about Lee Ving, lead singer of the very legendary band Fear, right? Mm-hmm. And one of their most infamous things is John Belushi was a big fan, and he got Lorne Michaels to book them as a musical guest, and they kind of like destroyed the place, didn't they?
Yeah, swore, destroyed the place. They brought a bunch of punkers with them to be the audience, and they just kind of went crazy. And I think to this day, that performance is like cut out of reruns and official releases. Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, a lot of movie fans will know him as Mr. Body in Clue, and the club owner in Flashdance. But Clue is definitely what I always think of for him.
Yeah, I looked up our boy Bagley Jr. He was nothing but a bit player at the time. I would say probably his biggest role that I could tell up until this point. He'd been working for a long time in tiny bit roles, like a good 10 years. But probably his biggest role before this was in Paul Schrader's Cat People. He played one of the the guys who worked at the zoo. But even that was a very small supporting role. So I think he legit was just a guy who auditioned to be a bum who looked like he just climbed out of a chimney, you know what I mean? So when we're talking about Defoe's, his rubber suspenders or whatever, he kind of comes in and licks the face of a tied down Diane Lane and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, again, I gotta kind of commend Walter Hill to where like those kind of things would mean a lot. They'd be way more insidious if this was a much harder edge picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's even I know this sounds strange because obviously it's not great. It's still, he's the bad guy. But there's a moment when he's talking to her and he says, all you got to do is like, fall in love with me for like a week and then you can go and that'll be it. And it's like, you kind of believe him, right? Yeah. Like there's even this like element of like, I think he's telling the truth. Not that I'm supporting what he's doing, but as you said, I think it's trying not to make it as gross as it could be or as it probably really is,
Yeah. Which I guess we should take a second to mention too, a little bit of, if you look at some of the roles that pretty much Rick Moranis, with the exception of obviously his SCTV stuff and, Strange Brew or whatever, where he's really going over the top. A lot of this, when Rick Moranis was in that phase, kind of pre-Ghostbusters like this, and you look at something like The Wildlife with Chris Penn and Eric Stoltz, he kind of was always playing these little sleazy weasels, because in The Wildlife, he's kind of a dubious music manager here who's also having a relationship with Diane Lane, and you kind of get the impression that he's just taking advantage of her here and using her, like he's not truly in love with her or anything. And he kind of plays a nerdy what do you call it, like in The Wildlife, he works at a shopping mall, he's like the manager, and he kind of is like, he kind of seems like one of those guys in his mid to late 20s who's just trying to get all the 18-year-old, 19-year-old girls that work for him, into bed type thing. So, like, I think Ghostbusters totally busted Moranis out of the mold that he was kind of a little bit getting typecast in the early 80s.
Well, I was just going to say the same thing, but frame it a different way to where I'd say, like, never before it's one of the prime examples of one role completely rewriting a person's real life persona, because I think Louis Tully made everyone see Rick Moranis as only the lovable nerd, and then you see him in things like Little Shop of Horrors and of course the Honey I Shrunk the Kids franchise, and then people just assume that that's what Rick Moranis is. Yeah. But to the point you're making, you might have heard this too. I guess him and Michael Pare did not get along making this. And Michael Pare talked about how like Rick Moranis was a very like he was talking about like he's one of those like very sarcastic, cutting comedians, like always making fun of him on set. And that's not the image of Rick Moranis we have nowadays, right? That he would come on set and just kind of be really mean to someone. But maybe that's who he was younger, and just realized that I'm going to lean into this Disney thing and become more. Yeah. Hey, I'm lovable, likable Rick Moranis. You know.
Well, that's definitely where the money is. And when Michael Pare kind of related that story on the documentary, I totally knew exactly what he was talking about, is those type of guys. And the one thing I do love about Michael Pare, I almost think Michael Pare is like more interesting in an interview in real life than he is. Like, he comes off as even more mythic, like bigger and mythic in real life than he does like even on screen back then. But of course, then again, he's like a 60-year-old man now, and he was like 23 when he made this and Eddie and the Cruisers. But like, yeah, I could totally see what he was saying. Like, Moranis kind of like, he sees this big, tall, good-looking guy come in, and like, you know, Rick Moranis can't compete with that on any level, so he's going to use his, you know, his barbed tongue to try and take this guy down a notch. And you know, I've been around people like that before, especially people who kind of, you know, not obviously not professional comedians, but people who fancy themselves as being, you know, funny or whatever. And that is hard to be around, and it's just after a while you just want to slap the guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, also to Moranis' credit, he might have also just understood that kind of tension would be good for the film, because they didn't like each other on set, and it comes across on screen, and it works for the relationship. I mean, you believe these guys don't like each other, as apparently they did not.
Yeah. Now get into it, because kind of like the love triangle in this, which isn't really much of a love triangle, but it's, you know, it's supposed to be a barrier between Tom Cody, because without Rick Moranis and Diane Lane's characters being in a romantic relationship at this time, you know, like there would be no barrier. It would just be like Tom Cody walks into town and they're back together, you know? So like, I think if anything, that's almost like a little bit of a weak spot, because like I don't really feel any real, I don't know, I don't feel the chemistry, you know, like people criticize Pere and stuff in this movie, but I would almost say like Rick Moranis should have acted a little more like, I mean, you know, like he was in a relationship with Diane Lane. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I mean. Earlier I mentioned like what I think the range and the gamut of the performances is, and I said that, you know, the two performances you could point at as being on a technical, just basic levels being maybe bad are Pare and Moranis. And the reason I say Moranis is, again, I like everybody in this, but I think he's trying so hard to be kind of a tough guy, right? And because it's Moranis, it comes across really kind of corny. Now, why I think it works is you can just buy that as the character, too. You can buy it as Billy Fish putting on a whole act, but it's not very convincing. The one thing I'll say to this, and this again speaks to me like something maybe Walter Hill does on a nice subtle level. So Deborah Van Valkenburg's character in The Warriors, I think, is like kind of I don't want to say like a super progressive character, but this, like, when there's that moment where she kind of admits that she's like, you know, what's the problem? Like, yeah, I like to sleep around on the weekends, and I look around and see these older women that are married and have babies, and I just want to have some fun while I can. And that was definitely not an attitude you saw a lot of like female characters having in cinema around that time. And then I think there's something kind of refreshing about Diane Lane's character in this, where she just, when she talks to Cody about why she's Moranis, she basically just says like, what do you want? Like, he's good for my career, you know? Like, I like that he has those kind of realistic motivations and moments with his characters, and doesn't try to sell like, oh no, Moranis is actually, you don't know the real him. There's something like he's got a great heart. She's like, no, I get it. Like, I'm with him because he's going to do good things for me.
Yeah. It's almost like he's a little bit of a caretaker for her, you know, obviously her career, but then also her. And like you don't know how much emotional damage, you know, she suffered when Tom Cody split town to go to the army or whatever he, you know, and all that's just played, I think, even really smartly, kind of vaguely. The backstory, you're kind of feeling it out as you go along. You know what I mean? But yeah, like I just like something like Moranis, lay a kiss on her, put your arm around her, something like. If the dialogue didn't spell it out, I never would have thought those two characters had any sort of romantic entanglement, you know what I mean?
I do also like too, a nice touch is once they changed, you know, this part for Amy Madigan and made it into McCoy, that there's like some jokes about it throughout, but there's never any like real thought of McCoy and Cody as an item. No. And in fact, I like that throughout the entire movie, it really does seem like McCoy is kind of rooting for Cody to get back with Ellen. And it's kind of like needling Moranis about it all the way through, you know, and it seems like she's pushing for that. So I like that they just remain friends and kind of two ex-soldiers that work well together.
So here's another striking, stylistically sequence and one of Walter Hill's favorite. It's they go to another, again, they're drawing similarities to the Warriors. They have to make their way through different parts of town. At this point they're back on foot again, and we kind of see them entering another part of town, and then we also get intercut with a basically literally a music video of Diane Lane's character. That's actually shot on video. So when you watch it on a big screen, it's actually very high quality video, but it stands out that it's different from the rest of the movie, and you're like, oh, why are we cutting back between film and video? And then you see as they get on the street that it's playing on a TV in a window. I thought that was a really kind of smart thing there.
This also looks like the coolest area of this city. This part of town. Yeah.
This is like the New Orleans Blade Runner red light district.
Yeah. I love it because that's the thing. Here you have not only that 50s vibe, but also you just said this kind of. Then you have the 50s and 70s merging here because you got some kind of 70s pimp kind of outfits going, and then you said there's a definite New Orleans vibe. Yeah, this is awesome. I love this. And this outdoor bar here. This is all really cool.
Yeah, and I think stuff and the production designer. Again, another one of my favorite 80s people here, E.G. Daily, popping in.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of the expense was just literally creating this world with the set. So they did film some of the anytime you see, a legit working subway, I believe that was in Chicago, but and a couple little other areas. But for the most part, it was shot on the back lot of Universal. And in order to be able to shoot, because they weren't going to be able to shoot all night, blowing all this shit up, shotguns, whatever. They had to actually shoot this movie during the day, and the way they did that was they put a giant tarp over 2 city blocks of the back lot, which was amazing, but it also created a lot of problems. Namely, besides just being really dangerous, whenever the wind would pick up, a lot of pigeons would get trapped in the tarp, on top of the tarp. So sometimes during takes,
pigeons.
No, go ahead.
So not only the pigeons, but then the wind too, and the tarp would be so loud as they were recording dialogue. They would go back and ADR a lot of this.
Yeah, and that was another thing, and obviously hindsight is 2020, but at least the documentary that I watched, because I know there's 2. The disc I had only had the first one that came out, but Walter Hill was very complimentary to Michael Paré. But Michael Paré talks about he could tell Walter Hill didn't like him because he was. A lot of the stuff he was doing in this movie, he had no idea how to do, and he felt like he was just kind of thrown into a lot of things. So he's constantly asking Walter Hill questions, and Walter Hill kind of wanted just a Clint Eastwood type that would kind of just stand there and not say anything and just do okay, walk in the shot, do this, go to he didn't want to. Walter Hill didn't want a lot of discussion about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. To the point in that opening part, where Tom Cody fights the gang in the coffee shop. He the stunt guy was just pick up the coat rack and hit the guy in the face, and he legitimately did. He just okay, he just hit the guy in the face. He never done a fight scene before. He didn't realize okay, I wasn't really supposed to hit him straight in the face because it almost knocked the guy out. You know what I mean? But it was a really wild time. We got to talk about this soul group here. This is an all-star cast of actors, for sure. So in the front there, kind of the lead man is ironically kind of the least famous guy, even though he is famous, Stoney Jackson, who's amazing dancer, been in videos, everything. He also would make a lot of movie appearances. He plays a really good role in another Walter Hill movie I just watched a week ago, Trev Trespass. Kind of interesting little movie, but the rest of it is really all-star cast because you got Michael T. Williamson, who would later get famous as Bubba from Forrest Gump. You got Robert Townsend. This was years before Hollywood Shuffle even came out. Robert Townsend.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, you have Grandel Bush, who he's another guy that's been in a ton of stuff, but I think a lot of people remember him from Die Hard. His role as I think it was the FBI agent. He was riding around the helicopter with Robert Davi. Yeah,
Agent
always
Johnson.
loved him. Yeah, Agent Johnson.
He's one of those guys. If you watch a lot of late '80s, early '90s, you just know his face.
Yeah.
I believe he plays 2 different characters in Lethal Weapon and Lethal Weapon 2. he's in both of those films, but as 2 different detectives. He was just popping up and everything. He's in the third Exorcist movie. Demolition Man briefly, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say, if I remember right, they gave him like a funky haircut, and I believe he was the boxer guy in the Street Fighter movie, but don't quote me.
Yeah, no, you're right. He's Balrog. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because didn't Robert Townsend make that movie, The Five Heartbeats, later on?
Oh, was that him?
I thought that was directed by him. Yeah.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah. So let's talk about old Tommy Pickles here, E.G. Daily.
Oh yeah, I love her.
I love E.G. Daily too. Such a cutie. But what do you think of like the addition of her character to this movie? Isn't it just strange? Like, right? It's just like it's a strange time in the film to add another like character to their group. And I also know that I've seen E.G. Daily talk about how she ultimately almost didn't want to take this role because it was very underwritten. She thought the movie was so cool and wanted to be in it. Yeah. But I think she was more interested in like the Ellen Aim role, and especially since she was a singer, she's like, why can't I play that part? And the way that Walter Hill eventually, the reason she agreed was Walter Hill was like, okay, well, we'll write a scene for you then. And then so we're seeing that scene now. And I'm just thinking, well, geez, if that scene was added late in the fact, if that scene wasn't there initially, then really what is the point of this character? Why do you suddenly have this other girl join this like motley crew? It's very strange, but I don't know. Yeah. I guess it's just the kind of thing you do with these films is you want I get it. It's cool that they meet up with this other band, but I don't really understand her character. And later she's just like living with Ellen suddenly in the third act.
She's like a fan following her. Yeah. Well, I think really what it was going for, Trev, because I kind of had the thing. I was like, oh, cool, E.J. Daly's in this, and then like when they kind of like the Soul group, they kind of band together with them. I'm like what, why is everybody kind of together? But I think it was they were just trying to do that thing of like they were kind of like following the template of the Warriors, where as they go along, they lose some members, they pick some members. Whereas like this one, you can't really lose any members because everybody's integral to the plot. But they kind of pick people up, like how in the Warriors they picked up Deborah Van Valkenburg. But yeah, our boy Robert Townsend co-written and directed and co-starred in the Five Heartbeats. So yeah.
Oh, by the way, to get back another one of my Fury Road comparisons, one of the things people love to talk about, the strange kind of unique structure of Fury Road is that, the movie starts with Furiosa fleeing from this Immortan Joe's headquarters, and then halfway through the film they decide, well, where are we going to go? Let's just turn around and go back. So it's literally a movie where half the movie is heading one direction, and then the next half is, okay, let's just go back the way we came. And that's what this movie does. They go and rescue Ellen Aim, and then they turn around, and now we're following them taking a different path, but heading back in the same direction. So again, just these little things to me line up to where I think these two films share a lot of similarities.
George Miller was sitting there eating his Vegemite sandwich, writing the script for, what was it, Mad Max, The Road Warrior, and he was like, this is pretty good, The Road Warrior, what I'm writing here, but if I really had the budget, I would do something much bigger, like Streets of Fire, and, 30 years later, he got to do it.
Imagine if Rick Moranis had played Immortan Joe.
Oh, that would have been great. I'm kind of wondering why he didn't, in all honesty. But at least they got that one guy to come back from the previous Mad Max movie. He was great.
Yeah. We lost last year, I believe. He passed away.
Yeah, he did. It was very sadly. And it's crazy because when you see him in real life, he pretty much really was Immortan Joe. Same hairstyle, same. I mean, not exactly, obviously the same clothes. He wasn't wearing like loincloths and shit, but he was a pretty flamboyant guy, pretty out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I gotta say, going back to E.G. Daily, I think a lot of people in this day and age know her as one of the voices on Rugrats. But I think the people the same vintage as you and me, Trev, will always know her as Dottie, right, from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah.
And then when I got a little bit older, I just thought she was amazing in Valley Girl, to the point that as much as I love Valley Girl and I love the lead actress, I'm always kind of like, oh, I wish they would have switched those roles. I wish E.G. Daily was the main role. Even though she's awesome in the movie, like I just wanted more of her in the movie. Mm-hmm. Oh, we got some racist cops. He's
another one of these guys. Yeah. He's another one of those actors who I just feel like I saw in a lot of things around this time. He just got one of those faces.
Yeah, I didn't look at the credit, but isn't the one cop, isn't that our boy Rick Rossovich that got mopped up by Arnold in the Terminator? And then he was always in other stuff.
Yeah. Okay, yes.
Pretty sure that's him.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
he would always be in movies, like I think like he was in like Let's Get Harry and stuff like that. He hung in there for a long time, yeah. But yeah, he's a pretty buff guy. I think that's why he got a lot of these roles. Oh yeah, he was also in Top Gun. Also in a movie I love, Spellbinder, with the amazing Kelly Preston. Played a supporting role in that. But yeah, all-star cast, even though nobody was a star at the time.
I'll tell you what, one thing about this, whatever this world is, this fantastical world that Walter Hill created, every vehicle is extremely flammable in this world.
Yeah.
One shot, just gigantic explosion.
I'm blanking the name of the exact model of those police cars, but apparently this movie, kind of induces a lot of winces from classic car lovers, because they rounded up all these classic 50s cars to be the cop cars, and then they just literally blew them up. And that was the part that Pare was talking about, where they just told him to go out there and shoot the shotgun, and they were going to blow the cars up in his face, which they did, and then everybody was hiding behind protective plexiglass, and he just stood there and got a face full of glass.
Now, you say that classic car lovers like wince and hate this because they're just destroying a bunch of classic stuff, but I have it on good record that's why this is Christopher Nolan's favorite film.
Really?
He just loves when people destroy priceless old things.
He does. And like when I heard them talking about that on a documentary about the cars, and how it was such a shame to destroy them like that, I started thinking of that because it's I've kind of become, for the first time in my life, more interested in cars now than ever. And one thing I noticed, Trev, is do you notice movies we watched when we were growing up? I would say 80s all the way through the mid 90s, before car product placement was a huge thing in movies. They would always use slight cool cars, but slightly older cars that weren't monetarily worth a whole lot, so they could smash them up and stuff. So you got to think how many cool classic cars, because every year, every model car becomes, classic car becomes rare and rare on the roads because they die or they rust away, especially cars from back then, but movies were just destroying cars left and right. And yeah, I mean, obviously this is kind of a period-esque piece, but new movies now, it's you never see a car more than 2 years old in a new movie, I've noticed. It's weird.
If you a couple moments ago, we saw the Shondells, the band, run across the street with everyone else, and Robert Townsend was doing a very over-exaggerated comedic run, so you can maybe feel already Townsend is figuring out his future persona in this. Say maybe I'm the funny guy.
It's interesting too, because you got to think people who we know, we're talking about our boy Bagley. I always wonder, what was the lifestyle like? This is the only time Diane Lane kisses Moranis, but what would your lifestyle be like, getting these tiny roles in movies and probably barely eking out a living, but doing it year in, year out? It's just amazing to me that anybody hangs in there long enough to get their big break. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's the real subway, so that's in Chicago. I thought that was great too, because they talked a lot about too, with the production designers. They really married together a lot of New York and Chicago aesthetics, and I like that. And even the production designers, one guy was trying to bring as much in from the 30s and 40s as he could. And here's our boy Paxton, he's back. But I like that because it's it leads to that thing of it feels familiar to you, but nothing is really exactly this way or another. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's everything's familiar.
I guess this is true of you too. I love this aesthetic of city, movies that are taking place in the city, but it's clearly a backlot.
Right.
A real obvious backlot is just something I love, and you typically only see it in musicals. Musicals will really lean into that. Even to the point of, I think, I haven't watched In the Heights, but in some of the trailers, I get that kind of vibe. Yeah. Or the West Side Story trailer. I think of the kind of, Little Shop of Horrors, to go into another Moranis film. Cities are always allowed to look fake in those movies. And I wish more movies would do that, because it does work for that kind of, look, movies, we know a movie's fake when we watch it. Sometimes you can lean into the fantasy of it. And I think that's another thing this movie is clever to realize. When you bill a movie as a rock and roll fable and lean into it being fantastical, everything can be heightened and have that kind of look. And that goes back to, like, I was going to mention this earlier when you mentioned the thing about Raven Shattuck, which is Willem Dafoe's character, kidnapping her and it being like a kind of a chaste rapist, which I know sounds crazy, but that goes back to that goes back to like the fairy tale vibe of this, right? Like fairy tales, that's the kind of thing a villain would do in a fairy tale, is kidnap the princess to make her love him, but not push it any further into territory, you know?
Right. Because, I mean, it's literally to the point where, isn't he, like, when he kidnaps her, they're, like, I can't remember if it's Defoe directly or maybe leaving, but one of them, like, they're literally hoisting her over their shoulder. It's, like, that cartoony, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But like, I mean, do you love these kind of, like, backlot looks as well as me? Like,
that was one thing I was going to bring up to you, is I think this is, like, in all honesty, because I'm very nostalgic for backlot pictures as well, Trev. Like, even to the point where, like, another thing that you would kind of, one of the last bastions of shooting on a backlot was, I would say, probably late 90s comedies and stuff, like some Chris Rock pictures, something like Half Baked or something clearly has backlot stuff. But, like, I think this is one of the best backlot movies, period, because it doesn't, like, it's so fantastical looking that you know it's a backlot, but it doesn't look overly backlotty. Like, they did a good job of, like, they overly dressed everything. Like, they built that diner, like, you put a facade on an existing building. Like, they did enough and they dirtied it up. Because a lot of times you'll spot a backlot because it's supposed to look like an inner city, but it's kind of too clean. And, like, I thought they did a good job of mixing that. And then, like, with the over-the-top production design, like, that one area that was, like, completely all neon and Blade Runner-esque. Like, it's obvious it's a backlot. But it's, to me, I don't know, it's got enough grit to where it's, like, it's not, like, cheap cardboard styrofoam background type feel. It is more of that fantastical, like, you're in a place that doesn't really exist. You know what I mean?
Well, it's that, like, not only does it actually look lived in, but I think it's really cool too how it's not very big, right? It looks like it's just this one little area, right, where from this you can stand in this one spot and see this diner. You can turn a little bit and see the Richmond, the theater where all, like, the musical parts take place. The police station's right there too, right? It's like this one block. There's this one block radius this whole movie takes place in that has its own community, right? When everybody comes out at the end, you feel like you understand that this one little block, all these people know each other. That's why they love Ellen Aim, because she used to live on this block, and now she's the hometown girl done good, coming back. I don't know. It just, like, it really, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it makes the film feel special in a way where it's like, oh, all these people are so connected, even though we only follow, like, 3 or 4 main characters.
I agree 1,000%, and obviously I'm sure some of that is, what do you call it, monetary limitations or whatever. But I also think Walter Hill, because he talks about this movie being so much of a Western. Like, when you watch Western movies, like, the town is literally like a town that's like a strip. You know what I mean? Like the pretty much everything happens in that same central area. So it's like, I kind of think he more than anything leaned into what you're saying about it being it small and being the community, and it's kind of like that thing too of New York where, like, all the Bronx people stick together, all the Queens people stick together, and so forth. So,
you mess with Spider-Man, you mess with all New York.
That is true. They like, nobody even takes a cell phone out to, like, when his mask is off when he's on the train. They respect his privacy. I think the guy here who plays, like, the main cop, who, again, like you said, like, he's not even, like, an elder policeman at all either, but he's kind of like the guy who's in charge here, or at least in charge of the little police here. I thought he did a great job too. He kind of reminded me of I'm blanking on his name. Our boy who played Creighton Duke. He kind of reminds me of Prototype. Is it Stephen Williams? Is that the actor's name?
Stephen Williams, but this guy, the guy playing the cop here, he's from Poltergeist.
Oh yeah, he played one of the researcher guys, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Not the guy who tears his face off in the washroom mirror, but
or who Steven Spielberg's hands tear his face off.
Yeah. I gotta say, like, this Rain is so perfect. It's so perfect movie, Rain.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is pretty, I guess, story-wise, we kind of had the big chase of our section of our movie, which is probably 2/3 of our running time. and now we're settling into the home stretch. Which, like, when I was watching this the other day, like, it's obvious, you know, the cop comes and warns Tom Cody, like, hey man, you got to get out of here. You know, Defoe's coming. His boys are they're going to wreck down this place if you're still here or whatever. And, you know, Tom Cody makes the decision, you know, to face, you know, he's not leaving. He's going to face him and all that. And I was like, damn, like we're kind of like wrapping up the movie already. Like, because this is a very short movie too, right? I want to say this is sub 90 minutes. Oh, it's 93 minutes. But I think in a little bit, like, well, we still have a bit of story here where Perret finally sweeps away Diane Lane. So I shouldn't jump ahead of myself. But I wanted to ask you, Trev, what did you think of the storyline where, because Rick Moranis was paying Michael Perret $10,000 to rescue Ellen Aim, or Eileen Aim, I should say. It basically, Diane Lane hates Michael Perret for taking money to save her. Like, what did you think? Like, because they play that very strongly throughout the... Did you think that was, like, justified? Or... I kind of took it as a little bit of a plot contrivance just to justify why them two weren't getting them back together earlier in the movie.
It is, but at the same time, it leads to a trope that you see a lot, and I love this trope every time. The, I was getting paid for this, but now I'm not going to take the money. Like that cinematic storytelling narrative shorthand to be like, see, this guy's a better person than we thought he was, right? We sold him as a mercenary. But now he's actually like, no, I don't need the money. And but I also like that he takes the money he owes McCoy, right? He says like, this is the $1,000 I promised. Yeah. I promised her, but I don't need the rest. So I agree with you that it's in there just to create some conflict between the two of them. And especially when right here is where you learn how the movie definitely needed to manufacture some conflict, because as soon as like it's removed, they just instantly start making out. Right?
Yeah.
The movie knows that's what we're here. The movie knows that's what we're here to see. But no, I like it just for that reason. Where I always love that moment where. By the way, how quickly did they have sex where they're still soaking wet from the rain here? Or are they supposed to be that sweaty? Was it that?
No, they're wet from the rain. Again, it's very chaste. Because I actually went back and rewatched this scene, because I watched the movie and then I watched the documentary. Michael Perret had some interesting comments about this, where he was saying he felt like he could have done the scene better, but all he could think about was Diane Lane in front of him.
Yeah, and I do not blame him. But...
Yeah, apparently he was in a young marriage that was falling apart, and he was starting to develop feelings for Diane Lane, but he knew if he acted on it, he would just be the world's biggest fucking scumbag. So he showed some restraint, but he could not act, like full concentration. I always thought this was funny because earlier in the movie, Amy Madigan McCoy, she had knocked out Bill Paxton because he was getting too lippy as the bartender, kind of giving her shit for being a tough woman kind of thing. And like here he's like, he kind of gives that look like, but it's like, did he forget that she knocked him out or like what?
She actually does. She has a line of dialogue when Cody sits down where she says, "I've been here talking things over with Clyde." So you get the sense that she's been trying to patch things over. So I like that little detail where, again, this area is so small, you're going to have to see all these people on every day if you're going to stick around. So those kind of beefs can't last long, I guess.
Tequila drinkers. I have to say, I even like Amy Madigan's kind of like poodle hair in this movie. Like, it's the way it's kind of chopped harshly. It's kind of tough. It's kind of cool. Now, if they remade this movie today, who are you casting in the four main principal leads of Tom Cody, McCoy, Raven, and Eileen?
Ooh, what a good question. Well, I'm going to give Raven just to Willem Dafoe again. I think he could still pull it off today. So I'm going to cheat a little bit there and say that can stick to Dafoe, because I just think there's not too much different there. I'm going to... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Dafoe could definitely have the same hairstyle. His hair has not changed a lick in 30 years.
For whatever reason, like, who popped into my head, and you're gonna hate this because I know you and I disagree about this person, but like in my an immediate like Tom Cody in my head was a Channing Tatum.
Oh wow!
Again, just that kind of physicality, kind of look dumb but handsome. I could see him maybe pulling off something like that. McCoy's a tough one, though. Boy, who would be a good McCoy?
See, that's the easiest one for me personally, but I don't want to. I don't want to tip my cap. I want to see if you come around to my conclusion as well. I'll let you gestate it on it for a second.
I'm trying to, in my head, for like Billy Fish, I'm trying to think of like who would be like the little comedian right now who could do that part. You know, I don't want it to be like Pete Davidson. No, thank you.
Oh, God. Enough Pete Davidson, please. Can you imagine if Pete Davidson got cast as Tom Cody? Oh, there, he knocked her out.
Yep.
He kind of had to knock her out, though, right? So that she would stay out of the way and not get hurt.
Well, again, by movie logic, there's no reason he couldn't have just told her, hey, we can't leave. I have to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
That's just, again, it's all Walter Hill is playing with the old tropes and the old cliches. But yeah, imagine that scene if he had knocked her out and then left her in the care of his other guy friend. You know, here we go, another returning Warriors cast member.
The DJ, right? The radio lady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same man who people will most likely remember as Chief on Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego.
Oh, yeah, that is her. Damn, I never realized that. I noticed her from the lips, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
The shape of her bottom lip.
Well, it's all you see in the Warriors, so it's a very memorable part of her face.
It is. It is. Yeah, I think it's tough to recast this. Like, I don't think this probably isn't the best choice, but if I really had to go for a Tom Cody type, going with the physicality, I think I would probably, unless I could really come up with like a, you know, out of left field thing, I probably would go with Chris Hemsworth for Tom Cody. Eileen, I think, is really tough because there's not that many kind of women that age now that I think could command the lip syncing performances. We should say Diane Lane does not do her own singing in this movie. She wanted to, but the producers wanted a different sound. They actually, when you hear her voice in the movie, it's actually did you know this, Trev? It's a composite of 3 people's different voices.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
Oh, I found that odd. And if you look at the names, it seems like only one of them was actually female, which is weird because when you hear her, it sounds completely like a female voice.
Well, it's funny. Like the first musical number, the one that opens the film, her backing band on screen is all men, but when they come up to the mic and like sing back up, it's clearly like female backup singers. I just thought that was kind of a funny little detail.
You know, like nobody would like say this because they all think he's just a dyed-in-the-wool stud. But I think if I actually really had to go to recast the Rick Moranis part, I actually, in my mind, I'm thinking Tom Holland.
Oh, I could see that. I mean,
especially if you had him playing off a really big beefcake guy, like a Chris Hemsworth type. Like I could see that working. Man, I guess it would be lazy because I'm pretty much just recasting Spider-Man here, but I probably would go with Zendaya for Eileen because I really thought she gave some great musical performances in that movie, The Greatest Showman, with Hugh Jackman. Man, the Defoe part is really tough. Like I really wanted like a really slimy guy. Can't think of it. I will finally spill the beans who I'm going to go with for McCoy, and it's kind of on the nose to more of the modern way, but I'm going to go with our good friend Mila Jovovich.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see her as McCoy.
I mean, heck, if I remade this movie, I'd probably just have Mila play Tom Cody.
Yeah. They could definitely do a what do you call it, a slow motion shot of where she flicks a cigarette butt, and then it makes like
you think if I gender
30
swap,
minor seconds.
If I gender swap Streets of Fire, am I going to get a bunch of like angry Streets of Fire fandom like making YouTube videos about me?
Probably not, but I'll be honest. If I got to do the gender swap, I think I'm not gonna completely flip flop gender swap. I think I'm gonna go a female Tom Cody and still a female singer. So
yeah, oh yeah.
But so I think my way would actually piss off people more than your way. But
I'm just doing all female Streets of Fire to really ruin some childhoods.
I think this might be the one movie though where you could kind of get away with that. In all honesty, maybe I'm having too much hope in the internet, but I think you could actually get away with doing that.
Now I do wonder why wouldn't this community have just ever done this before? Why do they suddenly now have the guts to all come and armed with guns and take care of this gang? But
Well, they had time to think about it, apparently.
Gotta love a movie that ends with a good sledgehammer fight, though.
Yeah. I think a good replacement for Dafoe, if he didn't already kind of burn up his villain card already, is maybe 10 years ago I would have gone with our boy James Franco. I think he would have given a good performance if he would have filmed it around the time he did like
a real life villain.
Well, he could really. I didn't think of it that way, but he could really play up that that tied to the bed scene, couldn't he? Yeah.
That works because he played Defoe's. Ben, you are just going that Spider-Man route because he played Defoe's son.
Oh yeah, I'm not even thinking. Apparently, my whole understanding of cinema revolves around two different Spider-Man incarnations. Why did I fail to work in Andrew Garfield to this? I don't know why.
Andrew Garfield can be the Bill Paxton part.
Speaking of which, I forgot to tell you. I think maybe I did, but I forgot to tell you, Trev. But I finally checked out our boy. His movie Under the Silver Lake with Garfield.
I still really want to see that.
You got to see it because it's like I don't know what you're going into thinking, but I was coming off just watching the director's other two movies previously, and this is like he's going into new ground here. It's I would say if I had to compare it to any other movie, just in terms of tone and feel, I feel it's like it's a spiritual successor to Donnie Darko.
I'm not the biggest Donnie Darko fan, but I'm not going to hold that against it. But
yeah, but I'm just saying that's what it's going to be way kookier than you could even imagine. Put it that way.
We haven't talked. I mean, during this fight, I guess maybe now because we keep mentioning him, but we haven't really talked. We talked about all the performances except for Dafoe. What do you think of Dafoe in this? I mean, I guess he's just doing the Dafoe thing, right? But this is very early in his career. This is one of like the roles that kind of starts to make him.
Well, like that's how I was thinking about, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is just like he don't have much screen time. He's just like whatever, like. But then I'm like, well, he already did To Live and Die in L.A., and I feel like Friedkin gave him way more opportunity to flesh out what he was doing in that movie.
Well, it's like filmmakers at this time, like with here, right? They just realize what an interesting face he has, right? And not them saying anything people don't know, but if you just photograph him the right way, he's a scary-looking dude. So the movie's not asking much more of him than that.
Yeah, but I will say, because we should say, for the most part, they did this fight scene themselves. It took 2 weeks to do this fight with the hammers, and there was some stunt intervention and all that kind of thing, but they mostly did it themselves. But the one thing that, like, because Defoe's barely on screen, but like I almost think he's doing this is the movie where, and I guess you could kind of say he reminds you of this actor and other things too, but this is the movie I think most for Willem Dafoe reminds me of Klaus Kinski. And Klaus Kinski, he always knew how to walk into a scene. He always knew how to, even without saying a word, have his physicality portray a lot. And if you look at Dafoe a lot, like where he walks in with them goofy rubber suspenders, the scene where he goes to confront Tom Cody, right after that, and he walks through the fire a certain way. And even during the fight scene, there's like little moments where he's posing in a certain way. And it's like, oh, I was wrong. To Live and Die LA came out after this. So no. So he really did just do little bit parts. But yeah, like I think Dafoe was like going for really like an expressionist thing because he knew he didn't have a lot to play with emotion or dialogue. I mean, he probably has a grand total of maybe 8 lines in this movie. Mm-hmm. And again,
I like that. I like that Billy Fish and Ellen were true to their word and actually let the Sorrells open for them now.
Yeah.
It's least you could do after destroying their bus and making them lose all their luggage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure whatever they got paid for opening this gig was probably still 1/10.
Not only do they open, but what I actually like is not only do they open, but they get to come out during her number later. Like they like join her band for like a big. Like even her band is backing them here. So
what do you think of the two numbers that Eileen sings at the beginning? We have "Going Nowhere Fast," which is kind of like, I feel like it's kind of like an ode to Tom Cody's character, and then this scene where she sings "This Is What It Means to Be Young." I feel it's kind of like a little more on her side, but also the love situation between her and Tom Cody being bittersweet.
I like both songs. We never even mentioned Jim Steinman. He wrote both these songs. So the great Jim Steinman, who we also unfortunately just recently lost.
Yeah.
But both great songs. Also, the song that the Sorrells are performing right now is like one of the bigger hits to come out of this movie. I think
it was.
People don't even remember that it's from Streets of Fire, but this was I remember this song more than I remember this movie actually from growing up.
Yeah, this song. What is it? I Can Dream About You by Dan Hartman. Yeah.
Yep.
So in this one, obviously the group is singing it. You got Stoney Jackson lip singing. I gotta say, like, I don't know when the thing became that like every actor had to sing their own shit in movies, but this is another thing that kind of makes this movie more of a throwback. Is the actors are obviously lip syncing the music, but I think cinematically it works better than if they would have sung it, because A, it's a better vocal performance than they were able to give, and B, I like that thing, Trev, of like, you know, an actor interpreting a song that like they didn't really sing themselves, but like they're kind of acting it out on stage. Like, I don't know.
Also, it's just also true. Not every actor can sing, no matter what they think.
Yeah, know? Exactly. So I gotta say, so let's talk about this scene. It's where Tom Cody says goodbye to Eileen before she goes on stage, and like I kind of like didn't remember exactly how this ended, and I was like, what's he doing? Like, why is he leaving? Like, I was like, oh, he ain't really gonna leave, because he's literally saying goodbye, and he's telling her, hey, you know, I know you're going places, and you know, I'm not the kind of guy that would carry guitars for you and all that. So he's basically he's making it sound like, whether this is his true intention or not, but he's making it sound like his ego won't let him be with somebody. Like, it's not like he doesn't even really give her the spiel of like, oh, I don't want to hold you back. You know, you need to go do your, like, he's just pretty much saying like, I can't play second fiddle to you. That's what he's saying. What'd you think about this?
Well, all I can really think is, again, I keep bringing up my Fury Road comparison, but there's a shot here in a moment of him walking through the crowd, looking back and kind of giving her the nod like I'm leaving. And that is exactly the way Mad Max leaves at the end of Fury Road. And it's the same idea, right? To where he's like, Tom Cody, like Max, is a character that feels like everyone else is better off if I'm not around, right? Like I'm the problem, I guess. So I can come and I can solve your issues. I can help when you need me, but I can't stick around. So yeah, that's like there's just so much about these two films that for me like work together. Where again, it's this simplistic chase movie that's built off of style and just how propulsive and energetic it is. And like I said, I think I don't dislike Michael Perry's performance, but I feel like you could like cut some lines out and he might even be more iconic. But yeah, I do think it's weird how Tom Cody's just like, yeah, I gotta leave because I can't go on tour with you. You know, I can't like carry your bags. It's like, really, you can't tour? You can't go on? You don't want to travel the country with this smoking, smoke show? Like, what are you talking about?
Which, by the way, let's. It's not just like, oh, it's a hot girl you can go kind of leech off of. This is the love of his life, the way it's presented in this movie. He pined for her the whole time he was gone too in the army.
But that said, the fact that the movie ends with him getting in the car with McCoy and driving off, that is more like that's the story you actually want to see, though, right? Those are the two you want together at the end of the movie, not romantically.
Yeah, no.
But for further adventures, I do want McCoy and Tom Cody together.
Yeah. And I think from when they were hinting at, I forget what the part 2 was called, but I think part 3 was he would be coming back to the city, so it was called like Going Home or something. Part 3 was supposed to be called. So like, or subtitle that, it was supposed to be The Adventures of Tom Cody, this and that. And so I think he would have ended back up, and I'm sure if he would have come back to the city, he would have, met up with her again if she was still there. But it's just like, I gotta say, like, I'm not gonna lie, it probably was just the overall totality of this film being a cinematic and very, very cinematic films, even if they're not overly sentimental or not overly sad or anything. Like, they choke me up because I realized the kind of the beauty of filmmaking, and I was like kind of at a crescendo at this point. So this movie, or this part of the movie, when I was watching it the other night, and Tom Cody is standing there, it kind of reminded me of that scene in The Wanderers when Ken Wall is like looking through the window at Karen Allen. But it's like, yeah, like that look on Michael Perry's face, and that's why I'm like, I don't really buy the criticism. It was like, to me, he earns his spot in this movie with that scene, and like, it was ripping my heart out, man. Like I was like choking up. I was like, oh, don't do it, you fucking idiot. Like I'm just thinking to myself, don't do it. Don't walk out on her. Like like don't. If more than anything, don't leave her with sleazy ass Rick Moranis. You know what I mean? And it's like the both of you, like, what are you doing, dum dum? To the point where I'm like, nah, this is too brutal. He's not really going to walk out on her. He's not really going to do it. And then like, and it's funny too because Michael Pare said that the way he played the scene was it was tearing his heart out, and he just wanted to cry. And Walter Hill was like, no, heroes don't cry in this movie. Heroes don't cry. And I'm just like, I mean, he pretty much does everything short of crying, just that look on his face. You can see how hard it is. And I'm telling you, just that shot of when it cuts to his face and he turns and he walks out the door, I was like, oh my God, man. Like, my heart literally just sunk in my chest the other night. It hit me hard. It was like melancholy for like the sake of, like, for no sake, really. Just because Tom Cody's a dumbass, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, again, it's Hill playing with old classic cinema tropes, right? These heroes always walk off alone at the end. They never quite get to be with the woman at the end. By the way, Ellen Aim, she really leans heavy into this fist pumping move. That's definitely her go-to move. And
then earlier with the hair flip too, yeah.
But we didn't even talk about like the directing of these music scenes. I know like Walter Hill was kind of hard on himself afterwards, saying that he felt like he was like, oh, I think maybe I was out of my league with the music, but I think like these scenes are fantastic. Like
I think they're in the top
use of
third
smoke
of the
and
movie.
light
Yeah.
and the editing. Yeah, I think he was like more acclimated to it than even he thinks that he was.
Yeah,
I'm surprised. I could have seen him getting into some like music video directing coming out of this. But
well, for sure, and it's just like because I think the reason it came out as good as it did was he didn't shoot it or edit it like it was fluff. He shot it like it was emotional part of the film. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like in the songs at the beginning and end, they're amazing. I've been listening to the soundtrack for like on Spotify for the last week since I watched this, and I'm like, these really are as good as songs as people make them out to be. I mean, the music really does. This movie didn't have the musical element at all, and it was just whatever. And they totally, the songs totally contrast the awesome Ry Cooder score, which we didn't talk about, but the Ry Cooder score really, Walter Hill will use them a lot throughout his movies. That helps establish that Western feel. But yeah, these songs, man, you want to talk about pulse pounding, emotional, sweeping anthem type of songs. That's what they are. And going back to like what you said, it's great that him and McCoy, it's not like a romantic thing. I like that she even tells him like, "Hey, don't worry, you're not my type." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
it's because she has a line earlier where she talks about an ex-boyfriend, but if that line wasn't in there, so this film came out today, boy, there'd be a lot of discussion pieces about her and the queer coding of McCoy. But
oh yeah, it'd be big time. It'd be like, can we claim this as representation? But it's just it is what it is. It's things were more unsaid back then. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very like I said, I'm very torn. I personally think Tom Cody made the wrong move, but
like you said, they were also thinking there would be more. And I know Michael Pare said that of the two sequels, I believe he said that like he was told that the second one would take place in the snow and the third one would be in the desert. I like that idea. I like the idea of all three movies being in like a different kind of locale. Yeah. I do think it's interesting that like Walter Hill saw this character as like his comic book hero, because like on the page there isn't much to Tom Cody.
No.
It really does take just the confidence to say, I think we're going to make a movie iconic enough and get an actor who looks badass enough on screen and has that kind of energy. And as we know, maybe they walked away from it not believing they got the right guy. That's too bad. It's too bad. And I also just think those interviews with Gross where he kind of puts it all on Michael Pare, that always bothers me when anyone throws a movie's failure all on the shoulders of like one person like that, especially the one person who clearly it's not. Like any other actor in this role, the same things that kind of sunk this movie would have sunk the movie no matter what. Like you said, like a lack of promotion and studio not getting behind it. To say that it's Michael Pare's fault, come on, man. Like that just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, and the kind of semi-retro, because at the time, like if you look back at early 80s films, Trev, which I guess this is tracking to a little bit closer to the mid-'80s, but even then, there were in the 80s, like, I grew up watching all these movies. Like, every movie that took place in the 50s then was a coming-of-age raunchy comedy. So to like kind of go back to like a little bit of a 50s vibe with like, you know, like a cool action hero and stuff. Like I don't know how much like the teens at the time were really buying that with the 50s influence, you know, when like everything they saw about the 50s was like, you know, sticking your dick through the wall in Porky's or falling out of the Studebaker on top of the girl in Mischief or whatever, or our boy Tom Cruise, he did a 50s picture. You ever see Losing It? Directed by Curtis Hanson. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying it sunk the movie, but again, I just think this movie would have done better. And I'm glad it didn't do it, but if it was contemporary, you know, with that kind of filmmaking style Walter Hill had, you know, I think it would have done better.
I just noticed in the credits, wardrobe provided by Giorgio Armani.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder why, because so many of the clothes were very kind of like especially what Tom Cody wears. It's just like Salvation Army type looking shit.
Yeah. Now, did you ever play the video game Final Fight, which apparently was like heavily influenced by this movie? And you can, once you know that, you can totally see it, like just in terms of like the story of the game and the design of the characters.
Yeah. Like when I read that doing research on this, I was like, oh yeah, because they totally just kidnapped the girl and everything. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you, what was the Walter Hill? Because I mean, what was the Walter Hill movie of your youth that you remember him by more from your youth?
Well, it would definitely have to be The Warriors. I think The Warriors is probably the Walter Hill movie I've seen more than any other. I liked 48 Hours when I was young, and I particularly remember seeing another 48 Hours in the theater as a kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would say, I mean, The Warriors today is still my go-to Walter Hill movie.
Yeah, like, I remember that, like we were saying when we did that episode, I remember The Warriors being a big deal in my whatever grade school when it hit not even cable, but just TV, local TV. I remember everybody was talking about it. But I think the one that I kind of whatever, and I've actually really been wanting to rewatch it, but it just never comes out like on any format. Like I don't even think you can get it on DVD, like to the point where it's almost like a lost film of his. Did you ever see Extreme Prejudice with Nick Nolte?
I have not.
Yeah, like, cause like I'm looking at his filmography, like I was like really aware of The Warriors and 48 Hours, but those were kind of like movies I caught on TV. And then later I did catch Southern Comfort. But it was really Streets of Fire, and Crossroads, I'd say. Crossroads was a big movie. But I remember going to see Extreme Prejudice, and it was like, I have to rewatch it because I literally haven't seen it beginning to end since the theater. But that was like a movie where I was like, damn, this is gritty. It was like Nick Nolte was a Texas Marshal or Texas Ranger. And it was just like a super gritty movie. And I remember going to see that and thinking like, man, this movie's badass. You know what I mean? And like, later on, Walter Hill did like Red Heat and some other movies that were good. But like, yeah, like, well, I actually really enjoyed the Bruce Willis one too. Did you like that one at all? Where he's in the desert town?
No, I didn't like that. I mean, I should probably revisit it. I didn't like it when I haven't seen it in years. But I remember finding it like, that's disappointing when I checked it out the first time. Yeah, I know that was like another Yojimbo like remake.
Yeah, it was.
And yeah, it didn't do much for me. I felt like there was not enough. I might like it more now because I think at the time I wanted more action from it.
Yeah, so I think you would. Yeah, because that was one of the ones like I saw it in the theater, enjoyed it, but then like I bought the DVD right when it came out, and I kind of watched it over the next couple of years and kind of grew on me. But yeah, I don't know, and. I haven't seen his last movie, but I saw the last theatrical movie with Stallone, Bullet in the Head. I thought was very good. Like it's not amazing, but it's a good minor movie, you know.
It's interesting how we decided to record this episode like a week or two ago, and like we hit at the right zeitgeist moment because yesterday it was announced that Willem Dafoe and Walter Hill are teaming up for a new Western. Did you see that?
No, I haven't heard this at all. That's amazing.
Deadline announced yesterday. Walter Hill is making a new Western called Dead for a Dollar, starring Christoph Waltz and Willem Dafoe.
Amazing. I hope you get... I mean, obviously, in this day and age, what's theatrical and what's not doesn't really mean anything. But I was a little bit worried with, after Bullet to Head did so poorly theatrical. I thought he was going to be relegated to almost micro-budget kind of direct-to-video movies, and with them two guys in it, like I'm sure it'll at least have a healthy budget for him to work with. So yeah, knock on wood. We're pretty good at cursing people here, Trev. But like, I didn't even look it up. I don't even know how old Walter Hill is, but I'm guessing he's got to be in his 70s at this point.
79.
Oh wow, he's even older than I thought. But yeah, like granted, the interviews I just watched with him were from 2013. It's not like they were from yesterday, but still, I don't know. He seems, it's weird. He seems like a guy who hasn't really changed at all. His temperament. I mean, he hasn't. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really seem like he's mellowed with age. It seems like the same themes he was making films about in his 20s and 30s, and he's still, whatever, 40 years later, he's still the same filmmaker. So
now I gotta ask, Goat, did your Streets of Fire Blue end with a title card telling you to visit Universal Studios?
I forgot, but I remember that happening at that was actually,
there was like a little thing at the end of the credits where it said, "When in Hollywood, visit Universal Studios," and there was like a drawing of the tram.
Yeah, and there was actually multiple versions of that, and I love that, throughout the years, and it went away. I don't think they do it anymore. I haven't seen it. I actually just watched a Universal movie the other night, and I didn't see it. So
for us, the movie's obviously wrapped up, and we're just kind of continuing the discussion. Should we say anything about Road to Hell, the sequel to this film?
Yeah, would you mind, because I don't think a lot of people even know about this in all honesty, would you mind kind of setting up really what it is?
Yeah, so I haven't seen it. So
yeah, what I
understand, so I think it's actually pretty tough to see at this point. Yeah. But I think you have to order like the Blu-ray directly from Pune himself or something. But the great Albert Pune decided. I think he was a huge Streets of Fire fan. And I guess he was, like many, kind of bemoaned the fact that these sequels were never made. So he just kind of took it upon himself in 2008 to make an unofficial sequel. But unofficial, it's like, I don't know, it's like one of those like fan films where the actor actually shows up. So Tom Cody, played by Michael Pere, and his sister Riva, again played by Deborah Van Valkenburg. Ellen Aim, definitely not played by Diane Lane. No. It's been played by someone else. But I've only seen the trailer. From the trailer, it looks fairly clear to me that I think what you're seeing is that him and Ellen have had a daughter, and it looks like the movie is perhaps him trying to protect the daughter from something. Yeah. But the big thing from the trailer is it looks to be filmed about 95% in front of green screens. Oh, and it's have you seen any of the footage, Goat, or no?
I seen a trailer a while ago, but I knew there was something really strange.
It's definitely like one of those garage green screen kind of movies. It looks like a Spy Kids movie. Everything looks very, very fake. But I thought what was crazy is they have some of the Steinman songs in the trailer, and then they actually, so this movie was called Streets of Fire because they thought they were going to get the Springsteen song. Yeah. And then they did not, and so that's why they turned to Steinman to write original songs. But they sing the Springsteen song in the trailer to Road to Hell, and I was like, wow, there's no way Albert Pune paid for that Springsteen song, right? I don't know what's going on.
If it's a cover version, you can get away with it because I believe you pay a much with a cover version. You pay a much smaller royalty just through ASCAP or whatever. Because I've actually looked into that, and that's kind of why you see a lot of cover songs used in the early '80s movies because they want to pay for rights or whatever. But either way, it's disappointing. It's a green screen film just because obviously Albert Pune. If anybody knows about him, he's a very low budget filmmaker for the most part of his career. I wouldn't expect him to have the type of production design resources that this film had, but I think doing shit on a green screen would really rob it of any kind of potential to have.
Yeah, that's the bummer to me because, honestly, I'm fully down for the idea of someone else making sequel to this as long as you have Michael Pere back. I don't think that's I'm not opposed to it, but the green screen thing is what keeps me from rushing out to see it because it looks too corny ultimately. It looks more like a joke almost. But
that's exactly what Alex Cox did at his own film with Repo Man when he made Repo Chick, and it was just kind of a girl. It looked like something you'd see on a public access channel, just some girl in front of a green screen. Yeah. But yeah, very disappointing.
But Michael Pere, you talk about if people don't think he's a great actor, let me just point out that I mentioned earlier that Grant Bush played two different characters in Lethal Weapon. Michael Pere plays a different character in all three Blood Rain movies. So that shows you his range,
I'm going to date myself both in time and also in taste, Trev. I saw the first Blood Rain movie in a movie theater, and I actually kind of enjoyed it.
I own all 3 Blood Rain movies on DVD, Goat.
Amazing.
I'm a little bit of an Uwe Boll defender.
Me too.
I think, obviously, he is what he is. He also understands what he is. Whenever I hear someone say, like, Uwe Boll is, like, the worst director and makes the worst movies in cinema, that's just like that. Boy, that's really that stupid Razzies mentality of let's dunk on the easiest thing. And if you really think those are the worst movies around, come on. Like, he's just making B-movie trash, but he knows it. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. They're not good, but they're entertaining usually. I think for those Blood Rain films, I actually like the first Blood Rain. It's not good, but it's just so fun. The second one, which is a Western, is actually pretty boring and not that great. But the third one, if anyone is like looking for like just really like a good time, total B movie, hell, like D movie trash, Blood Rain. I can't remember what the third one's called. I think it's called Blood Rain: The Third Reich because it's finally like the World War II one. Yeah, that one is so fun. Like that is just such a like dumb trauma-esque kind of B movie. That one's a good time for sure.
Yeah, I've only seen parts of them, and the Western one. I want to say at one point it was on Netflix streaming like way back in the day, like 10 plus years ago, and I tried to watch it and I couldn't get through it. But I'm gonna say controversial because I was kind of drawn, in all honesty, to the first Blood Rain because I'm a big fan of Michelle Rodriguez, so I kind of like lost interest in the franchise, because she's only in the first movie, but I actually kind of like the replacement girl more than I like Kristanna Loken, in all honesty.
Really? And Natasha Malth?
Yeah, Natasha Malty or From what little bit I've seen, who's the better Blood Rain to you?
I actually like Kristanna Loken a little bit more.
Okay.
I think Malty has like there's something about her voice where she does not seem very intimidating as Blood Rain. I know, like, who cares, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, they are just, I'm watching them because they're trash. But But yeah, I like Kristanna Loken more, I think, than her. But whatever. Like I said, they're just fun. I don't watch these for them to be good. I watch them because I watch them to be bad and just laugh at them or laugh along with them. Because I do think Uwe Boll is in on the joke usually, honestly.
Oh yeah, the one Uwe Boll movie I actually really would like to see. And by the way, I actually like his dramas. He did a straight up drama before he kind of got too wild with the video game films. He did a drama called Heart of America, which is about a small town and like kind of violence and shooting and stuff. I thought that was good. I actually enjoyed the first Rampage movie for what it was. It was pretty ridiculous, but for what it was, I enjoyed that. But
he also made a movie called, I don't know if you ever saw or know of, he did a war film called Tunnel Rats.
Yeah,
that was good. It was like a good movie, and like no one talked. Like he's not like that's the thing. If you give him like the right kind of script, and if he cares, like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I've been wanting to see that one because there was this weird time where I thought he had dropped out of filmmaking, which later he would drop out. Which, by the way, thanks for joining us for Bullcast. But like he made Tunnel Rats, and he made I want to say there was like a movie called Stoic or something. It was like Eddie Furlong going to prison or something. Like, but he made a couple that like I wasn't even aware of till like way after the fact. And no, I have not seen Tunnel Rats. I think you can get it on DVD because I think it's been in my Netflix queue literally for like 15 years, but I never got around to seeing it. But I always wanted to see his first film that launched his career, German Fried Movie, which was like a German take on Kentucky Fried Movie, and I've never seen that get an official release or even like on YouTube or anything. Like I don't know how you would see that one or if it was ever commercially released outside of cinemas in Germany. But yeah, so that's it. I mean, we dipped our toes a little bit into Walter Hill territory, but I think definitely he's got some other movies that are interesting. I actually have a couple of his movies on disc that I haven't watched yet. I got The Driver and Hard Times on Blu-ray that I need to
The Driver?
watch.
You never seen The Driver? The Driver is great.
Yeah, no, like, I have the Blu-ray, and I sat down and I watched the first 20 minutes of it a while ago, and, like, something happened, and I, meant to get back to it, never did, but, like, yeah, from the little bit I've seen of it, The Driver, to me, looks like was the main inspiration for the Nicholas Winding Refn film Drive, but I could be wrong about that. But
what do you think of Southern Comfort?
I love it. I want to say I saw it long after the fact. I want to say I didn't see it till like the mid-90s on TV, but I love it, man. It is fucking awesome. Powers Booth, Carradine, they kill it in that movie. I love that. Like, to me, I don't know. To me, that scratches the itch personally a lot better than Deliverance does. But that's just me.
Wow. How disrespectful to the memory of Ned Beatty.
I know. As soon as that came out of my mouth, I was like, "Oh shit, Ned Beatty just died." But but maybe that's a good thing. That I prefer the one. Maybe I'm more of a Ned Beatty fan, where I prefer the movie where he doesn't get anally raped in it. So.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
This is kind of like a fun fact because I remember showing my dad this probably 10 or 12 years ago. But well, he's not a little boy now; he's an old elderly man now. But the kid that was in the movie, the plays the banjo, he was he was on eBay like back in the day. Like I want to say like I found him like 2008, 2009ish. Just Xeroxing screenshots of him in the movie and signing them and selling them through eBay. Amazing. So yeah, Trev, I want to say thank you for bringing this one up because I actually meant to cover this on the show years ago, and some stuff happened and we didn't get to it. But when we were me and you looking for something to do and kind of perplexed, and then you brought this up, I was like, oh man, I would love to do it. And I always like the movie, but it's one of those things that sometimes you think you like a movie, then you rewatch it, and it just, maybe you just forgot how great it was, or maybe just at this point in life you appreciate it more than you did earlier.
That's totally what happened. Like I said, like I saw it come up on Netflix. I saw some people talking about it on Twitter. I was like, okay, yeah, that might be a fun one to do. Maybe I'll go back and check it out and see if it looks like something I'd like to do with Goat. And I started watching it, and like I said, then that's when I realized I don't think I've ever seen this all the way through. And dude, I completely fell in love with it. And like I said, I went and bought the Blu-ray pretty much immediately. I introduced it to another friend quickly. So like in the last couple of weeks, I've watched this movie like 3 times now, and This is definitely a Blu-ray I'm going to take off the shelf and revisit a lot. Like this is a great movie. I do love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more than fair to say if you got a copy of this sitting on the shelf, I mean, you're going to dust it out possibly every year. Definitely.
Yeah.
Don't let more than 2 years go by before you revisit this, because I mean, to me, it's just right up my alley. It's that blend of being over the top but not being campy at the same time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just I just that's the sweet zone of movies for me. Like you're going over the top, you're going wild, you're going outrageous, but you're not really nudge winking the audience being campy. You know what I mean? And
because of like the simplicity we talked about too, it's a movie that doesn't demand a lot of your attention or focus, so you can just kind of have it on in the background, or and you probably will get sucked into it, but it's not The Godfather. You have to get yourself into a certain kind of mood to watch it.
Right. Yeah. It's an easy breezy watch. You'll be entertained from beginning to end. It's one of those movies. I think it works both ways as a popcorn movie. You can sit down with a big bowl of popcorn, eat it, be larger than life, transfixed, and it's also a great movie where you can sit down and drink beer with your buddies and watch it, and it's it works both ways. So,
or you can just watch it and enjoy it on a cinematic level too, of all the interesting things Hill is doing with the genre and visuals.
I could definitely put on a beret and sip some Perrier and enjoy this film. But yeah, so again, Trev, I want to thank you, and obviously, more than ever, we want people to go check out your other shows, Days of Future Podcast, Examining the X-Men, and also amazing coverage going on in Failure to Franchise of Mila Junovich, which by the time this airs, this will be Mila Jelajovic, so it will be over, but an epic event.
Yeah, no, so we are heading into our summer surprise. We actually let an online randomizer pick our next 5 movies.
Wow.
So we got some interesting ones coming up, including Goat. I'll drop the news here, although you'll hear it at the end of the newest episode of Failure Franchise. But one of the movies the online randomizer picked for us, and I know this is going to excite you. It'll be a first-time watch for me. Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Oh my God! Wow, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. Yep.
It's going to happen. Amazing. The day I thought never would come is trying to come. Amazing. And it's great timing too, because we're just like right in the midst of like Star Wars is heating up now. Oh no, wait, no, it's not. No, sorry, I was thinking something else. No, Star Wars is not heating up. But yeah, always a fun thing. And also too, I'm gonna throw out a shout out to to our friends over at the Kaiju Transmissions. I really enjoyed. I held off on the episode that you guest starred on because I wanted to wait till I saw the movie. And for my birthday movie, I picked Monster Hunter, and I loved it. And I loved your analysis of it over on the Kaiju Transmissions. And I feel like you and me are completely on the same page with that film.
Yeah. No, I'll also give, because they are buddies, I, in that same vein, thank you for shouting out the one I was on, but I'm going to give a shout out to an episode I was not on. If anybody wants to hear like a really great interview episode, they were lucky enough to interview the director of, Ape versus Monster, the Asylum mockbuster of Godzilla versus Kong.
Oh yeah, I saw
somebody
that
who's always, I was on the episode reviewing that film, but I wasn't able to join them for the interview, but I thought, Bird and Matt did a really great job with the interview, and I thought it really is a fascinating interview, and I like that guy so much, and I've always been interested in like that world of cinema, right? That Asylum mockbuster model, and he is very open and telling about it, and that's definitely one to check out for people like me who are really into B-movie cinema and the perils of that and the difficulties of that, how quickly they have to shoot them, how the scripts are quickly written to tie into the film and coming along. It's a great episode.
Yeah, I can tell you I'll be listening to that tomorrow when I'm working. But like I always love that whole Asylum thing because I feel like you're trying to rip off a movie when you've only had trailers to go by.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So anyway, again, Trev, thanks for obviously just coming to hang out as always. It's always a good time. You know, as people know, we could sit around and we can talk for 3 hours, can't we?
Yeah, we can.
So yeah, but also too bringing this great movie along with you, Streets of Fire, or as it's known in Germany, Straßen in Flammen. That's what Uwe called it when he went to the cinema as a teenager.
I like that better, Straßen in Flammen.
Straßen in Flammen, that's right. So all right, everybody, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you right here again soon in the Movie Graveyard.